haven't been beekeeping all that long, and we were just discussing before, no matter how long we have been beekeeping, we're still amateur beekeepers and forever learning. And the concept of our beekeeping is keeping bees on building tops in the city. We started out as backyard beekeepers, with enjoying just having our own single hive in the residential backyard. And one morning Vanessa woke up and thought, we need to take bees back to the city, that we don't see much wildlife in the city, and people need to understand where their food comes from and how their food's pollinated, and all those reasons of why we all keep bees, I think. And so we had some foodie friends who were chefs and restaurant owners, and we approached two of them and proposed that we install some hives at their restaurants in return some honey and those sorts of things, the usual deal. And there was that initial fear of having a box of bees at their restaurant where people would be eating. And so we explained that we would look after them, we would harvest the honey, we would supply them and be on call. And basically they got honey for nothing at the start, so it was telling them, explaining it to them in that means, got it moving ahead quite quickly. So we rolled out a couple of hives in Fitzroy, Paran and Carlton, and from there the media did a few stories on it, like the Epicure and the food-based media stuff. So the other chefs all seemed to get interested all of a sudden, and they all wanted hives because their other chef friends had hives, and it seemed to be like everyone needed to have their own hives all of a sudden if you were a chef or if you had your own restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a whole movement where people are wanting to access local food. People are really interested in sustainability and environmental reasons as well. And I mean, and chefs of all people should be greatly concerned because it's their livelihood.
Yeah. And so from there we organised, it was based as a small community project. It turned into something much bigger, and then we had to restructure it a little and work out our sponsorship and adoptions and things like that. And from the press, yeah, as I said, it got much bigger than we thought it ever would. We then started rolling them out. Some people have got them in private yards, some businesses have got them just for sustainability reasons, environmental awareness reasons, and the foodies have got it for food production as well as just for food origins and things like that. It's been an interesting adventure. It's been going on for a year and a bit now. It was November 2010 we officially started. Then the first hives went out. And along the way, as I said, we're forever learning, as well as learning about the way in which we are going to run our project. And one of the big things that we came up with along the way was to not blend any of our honey. And what we were finding is our hive in Carlton was completely, the honey from it was completely different than Fitzroy. That's literally a couple of streets away. And so we decided we wouldn't blend our honeys, we'd keep them different, and along the way we've started accumulating more and more honeys, and we've found that every time we collect honey from a different hive, it tastes completely different than 2 streets up, 1 street up. So we've got Little Burke Street, Little Collins Street, on the fringes of the city. They're all completely different, and it's given us a slightly gourmet edge to the honey industry of chefs being able to choose.
Yeah, food pairing. Yeah,
they're able to choose the type of honey they want for the type of meal they're making, or hay fever sufferers contacting us saying, "Do you have Ascot Vale honey?" And because for my hay fever, and we're able to supply all those sort of things and match honeys with the demands that people have. And also we've found Melbourne seems to have a bit of an iconic rivalry with suburbs, like that's football based basically. Like
so Collingwood the best.
Well, we're finding there's a bit of north or south of the river rivalry, the Yarra. That's a bit of a divide, and we've also finding that Fitzroy claiming that theirs is better than Carlton's, and that's been exciting for us to see this rivalry that goes on between the two hunters. What else?
The other thing we've been doing is setting up a distribution network in the city. So we've had a few places where we when we're doing our rounds, people can get onto the internet and place an order, and then we can drop them off while we're in town. People have been liking that, so we've got a few, probably 6 or 7 places where people can pick up honey, and we've got about 10 distribution spots where people are retailing some of their honey, and they're retailing their most immediate local area, and then whatever they decide that they like, and really it's down to whatever there's available, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's great that people have been very embracing in Melbourne, and from different aspects of different areas of different types of groups of people as well. But we also always have to remind people that it's not about the honey, it's about the bees, because when we started this it was all about maintaining healthy bee populations and getting hives out there for pollination purposes and stuff. So it was a whole awareness thing that we wanted to encourage. But foodies went mental over, you know, selecting your own single origin type of honey.
Yeah, and so we do remind ourselves that and the hosts of the hive, that the honey is a byproduct of having healthy bees there. So you know, we just reassure them that every time, you know, some of the restaurants, every time we went, we installed the box of bees and literally came 2 days later just to make sure they hadn't absconded and they settled quite nicely. We came inside, they said, "So is there honey in there?" And, like, you know, we just, you know, some of them
so
you do.
you're educating people on it.
Yeah, well, that's another factor that's come with it, is this huge education and awareness of the campaign that goes along with it. Is before we were beekeepers, we were just as naive about the importance of bees, and you know, in this country we take them for granted. So we have an opportunity to get some messages out to people now, which is, you know, really quite nice. Now interested in talking to female beekeepers, just to sort of keep some sort of rough log, is the theory is that, well, my theory is that they can smell the hormones of an unmated queen, and therefore you're a new young queen, and you're a threat to their current queen, because you're unmated. If you're
I don't know.
I'm an old granny.
I don't think it'd be.
There's something.
I'm going to say when we're on the loose.
So you want people to write in and do
I mean,
We just speak to other female beekeepers, but we just find
It's a good subject
really
for a
quite
PhD for someone, isn't it?
Yes, it could be indeed.
And so that's the only thing I can think of. Is
Well, it could well be
And for male beekeepers that are really in touch with the
certain
feminine side.
products of insulin
And
are
so
coming out in your
HRT,
perspiration,
Could be.
Yes.
and that could attract them.
Yeah, because well, the whole colony is run on pheromones
Something-
and hormones.
They
I've got a
always have a
question
go
as
at
well.
me.
Sorry?
You're not a creationist as well.
No.
I
A
got a
lot of research
Do you
needs to be
find,
done in this field.
different suburbs have different amount of money of honey.
Yes, and it's changing. Like, for instance, last week, or the last 2 weeks, there has been nothing in Carlton, where in
Northern suburbs in
the
general.
northern suburbs in general,
So
and
they're
it's
not
probably
flowering.
maybe perhaps after that Christmas
Right.
annihilation we had through
The hail.
with all the
Oh,
hail.
Yeah, so
yes.
it's the cold weather that they got in the middle of their flow, the hail which has ruined the buds, the water which has washed away any nectar they had coming, and also the ground being too wet for any further flowering after it. So
But
that's
yeah,
at
it
a
has.
standstill.
But then there was it does change, and it can't stops and starts in
Yeah.
certain sections as well. Like we found we had some honey from St Kilda just recently, and then we've had honey in Ascot Vale when there's been nothing happening in Brunswick. It's yeah.
Yeah, do you have in the other suburbs, say in Melbourne or things also hives?
Not as a fairly close to this, or in the metropolitan area, close to the city fringe, and we're just slowly working our way out of that. But you'll find just the polyfloral varieties means that there's always something on, and then they'll always be collecting something. You do see it slow down and ramp up at different times. But yeah, definitely we can find that one suburb's done nothing, another suburb is flourishing.
Across the station.
Right. Now, what sort of honey are they bringing in there, if any?
Well, they're actually bringing in a quite strong brew, and we weren't quite sure what it
fascinating.
was, and it tasted quite caramelly.
It had a strong punchy flavour in there.
Paul Davies seemed to think that perhaps he thought it was some blue gum which was in there. There's supposedly some in maybe Fitzroy Gardens, but I actually looked up, there's about 10 blue gums in the Botanical Gardens.
And are they flowering?
I personally don't know, but the city honey, well, I don't have a palette to be able to pick yet.
How high up on the Rialto are they? No, it's at the Alto.
The Alto.
Oh.
Yep. So they're on the 4th story there.
Yep.
Yeah, 4th story rooftop.
The highest bees we've got are on an 11th story.
And how they go?
Yeah, they're going really well.
Yeah.
Really, really well.
So they don't
really
mind
strong.
climbing up that high.
No. I think from what we've read around the world, I think 14
Stories.
14 stories is the most that someone's gone to. So we're keen to challenge that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, we'll give it a go. Yeah.
We've got also a hive in Exhibition Street, which is at Trunk. It's on the corner of Little Lonsdale.
Yeah, that's interesting because the Melbourne Museum started off with an observation hive there, and it was quite a disaster eventually because they had virtually no food. They starved.
Wow.
Oh, really? Wow. In Carlton.
In Carlton, yes. That's all their equipment piled up there with H135 on it.
Well, we've got 2 hives. We've got in Carlton. We have one just off Drummond Street, which is very close to the museum,
It's right.
and they're flourishing. They're doing really well.
Wait, what year was that? Might have been a particular
Oh, that's
year.
4 years ago probably.
Oh, really?
The drought.
I still would have
End of the
expected
drought.
it to do well.
The drought, yeah.
That was still the
Parliament
drought, wasn't
Gardens.
Would have been
4
the
years
end.
ago?
About the end.
Yes,
of
it was during the drought.
Close to the end.
I still would have thought
But no, they actually swarmed in the middle of winter in July.
Oh,
Wouldn't they go to Royal Park?
They would,
Yeah,
yeah. Like
it's
whenever
very
you
far.
think, oh, it's right there, but then it's only not that far away for them to find something. So
Yeah. Everything we've put out seems to be doing really well. So I'm not
other
sure.
than dealing with things like wind,
Yeah.
because sometimes some of the placements are meant to be, well,
bit more
because you're not
protection.
there every day as well, it's hard to know how windy it does actually get in certain spots. And we've got one hive in Paran, which is a little bit. They're surviving and they're doing okay, but they should probably be a bit stronger. And I think it's because they're getting wind, that's the stuff coming through in between 2 buildings.
Yeah, and in the winter and any cold days, you just see it takes too much heat from the hive, and sometimes they've got a little bit sick.
Do you feed them over winter?
No.
We haven't had to. All the colonies that we put out last season were all swarms or rehomed colonies from, compost bins and possum boxes and that kind of thing. And they all survived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you handle swarming season?
Well, we've done pretty well so far.
Like with your swarms, with your hives and the buildings,
Yeah.
have any of those swarmed that you know of?
I suspect one did in Fitzroy.
Yep.
We hadn't marked the queen, so we weren't 100%.
Hmm.
And we thought that it might have. But everything else, just regular maintenance and doing what we can, making sure, that things like there's enough room and keeping them as happy as possible. And again, like I was saying before, in terms of just general observations, while you're with your bees, before you rush in and open the lid, you just sit there and watch for a little bit and see, the things, is there pollen coming in?
What's the activity like?
What they're doing, are they all rushing in or are they flying in and out? Because they can be signs, things like there is a atmospheric pressure drop, and if they're all rushing in and none are coming out and you take the lid off, they're not going to be that happy with you. So there's impending storm or rain and so just take the time to observe the bees and see what they're trying to tell you and learn their behaviour is important. But yeah, swarm prevention is just what we sort of have been taught to do along the way is remove queen cells, make sure there's enough room, do all the things that we're taught.
Keeping them busy.
Keeping them busy, idle bees are the problem. Keeping them working and busy. One sign that we have noticed, and we again are sort of going to try and keep a track of it to see how real it is loitering bees in the lid. of a hive. That if you go to a hive and open up the lid and you've got a cluster of bees in the lid not doing anything, we've found that that's a good indication that there are queen cells in it, and they're just sitting around waiting for the cells to be mature enough for them to swarm.
No, I need more things to do anyway.
So they sit there loitered. So it's like they've created the queen, they're waiting for it to mature, and then they just sit there doing nothing, waiting for the time to leave. And that's been, you know, quite
a good indicator.
Yeah, quite a good indicator that there's something going on that we need to check what is going on, and it's usually there are queen cells. So I'm not sure if it's been documented before. Yeah, I'm sure some of
I have always, when I open the lid, I always have quite a few bees up there.
Yeah. When you say quite a few, like clusters, like
No,
handfuls
no,
of
no,
them?
no,
No,
no.
I'm talking, sort of handfuls of them.
Really?
Yeah, really. Like a lot of them. If you turn it over and they're full,
No.
that's a pretty good sign that they're just hanging around waiting to swarm, I think. We'll see. But no, these are the things that's why we get together and we discuss.
Can Ian
beekeeping.
answer that question, Ian?
Ian, have you noticed that?
Do you know about that? The bees on the top of the lid?
Bees in
The
the
bees
lid.
in the roof,
Yeah.
with the bees in the roof, they're certainly overcrowded,
But do you think
and
they're just...
overcrowding will then tend to swarm. Yeah.
Because they want to find.
Yeah, it all depends again on the pheromones. The queen produces pheromones, and as long as all the bees in the hive are getting their little daily dose of pheromones, everything's fine. If you get so many bees in the hive that the queen hasn't got enough pheromones, then they'll start producing queen cells. If they're getting their dose of pheromones, that tends to inhibit them from raising queen cells. Once there isn't enough pheromones to go around, they'll start producing queen cells. When they produce queen cells, they're on the way to swarming. So, yes, you've got so many bees, they're not getting their daily dose of pheromones, so...
Encouraged a lot of restaurateurs to have hives and things on above their shops and whatever. I mean, is that now a profitable business? Like you say you've been in it a year, or is it still trial and error at the moment? I mean, how much can you charge someone for a kilo of honey at the end of the day?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
Isn't it? Is the novelty going to wear off after a while and say,
Yeah, well, like
I'm
we
just
said
going
at
to
the
go buy
start,
it off the shelf?
the honey is a byproduct of what we're doing, so that's why we had to implement
Yes.
some sort of costs just so we can keep the project going and keep it sustainable.
So you're thinking of it as a project, not a business?
We like to keep it that way at the minute. Long term, it could be a profitable business, and it looks as though we've done some figures, and it looks as though it could really work. So what we've decided to do with the people wanting hives, we had people who wanted to adopt, and so that was
Take over a hive.
we would get a little bit of honey out of them, and that would help us maybe break even. And then when it sort of boomed, we had to rethink it and work out some sort of method to make it sustainable.
Oh yeah, they started taking over all of our time.
That's
Yeah, have you got other jobs?
we used to.
We still do a little bit of
Little bit of IT.
IT work ourselves, but not a lot. We don't have time to.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
So we implemented a sponsorship system rather than just adoption of people offering their space to get involved. We've implemented sponsorships, which is a lot of the businesses are taking up now. So they are giving us an annual maintenance fee for us to come around and check them and to look after them. So we keep ownership of the bees, and we site them, we look after them, we extract the honey, but they're paying us an annual fee to do that, and then paying the annual fee, they get their honey share again, that we offer them is 20 kilos,
No,
20% or 6 kilos, whichever comes first, and then the opportunity to buy at a wholesale rate, and anything left over we retail to try and sort of cover our costs. And looking at the figures, long term, if we get enough density and clusters of hives, it can be quite profitable.
Maybe, I don't know. But then when we get varroa, we're finished. There's lots of people out there who don't necessarily beekeep that want to try and help and do something. Whether it be planting bee food or whatever. There's lots of support and interest out there.
Vanessa, through social media, had just said if anyone out in their gardens, if they've got the time off, they've got
If you're
food.
kind enough to put some honey, water out for the
Yeah,
bees.
if you've got water out for the bees, can everyone just make sure that they've got something for the bees to float on in their water sources? And this flurry of social media came back of people with bird baths and ponds and things and putting corks and things out that they weren't aware that you needed to do that for bees, and then had other people going and putting buckets of water out just in their gardens for bees.
People were taking photos and putting them up on
that's the best
Twitter and
way.
showing.